I saw this post today and it got me thinking a lot about how to train in a bulk versus a cut. Should it be any different and does it really matter? So I actually tend to agree with a lot of what is said here that during a bulk, you really should be focused on hypertrophy. So in hypertrophy training, we're probably going to be increasing volume. We're definitely going to be increasing proximity to failure. So the intensity of our workouts is going to go up. That's going to be our stimulus for growth. And then we might as well take advantage of the fuel we're giving ourselves in the surplus to actually build muscle. So we're going to want to focus on that surplus coming from protein and carbohydrates to store as glycogen to fill up our muscles, and the protein obviously to repair and build more muscle. So that hypertrophy training with more volume, more intensity is going to be more glycogen depleting. So that's actually going to lend itself again to giving ourselves more fuel. That's going to be more beneficial for that type of training. So we, again, might as well utilize that fuel to build as much muscle as possible. Now, as far as strength training is concerned, I don't think you actually need to be in a bulk to build and train for strength. So with strength training, the goal is to lift as heavy a load as possible one time. We actually don't need a lot of volume. We can do that with a few heavy sets per week that at least maintains our strength and can possibly build it. And with those lower volume sets, it's not nearly as glycogen depleting, and your body restores that a lot quicker. You're able to recover actually faster than when you're pushing that high volume, high intensity training. And with strength training, we don't need to train anywhere near as close to failure. So the intensity doesn't have to be there quite as much. So it's not going to be as glycogen depleting. We can do it with less volume. So I think actually training for strength in a maintenance or a cut phase actually does make a lot of sense. Now, here's my rub. If you really want to be as strong as you possibly can, that really heavy strength training, when you start to get closer and closer to a max out or a competition and you're really pushing the weight, it can be really, really depleting. So you may actually need more fuel in those moments, but I think you can go to a maintenance phase or, maybe some sort of slow mini surplus. You don't have to go quite as hard. It doesn't have to be a full on bulk. You don't have to get fat to lift heavy. So I think that might be where the confusion is. I don't think you need quite as much fuel, but again, when you start getting to really, really heavy loads, I notice that I get very depleted. I get really hungry. It makes it really hard to cut. So I think finding a nice maintenance phase to really maximize your strength based on the weight that you want to be in a competition or just the weight you want to walk around at and be as strong as humanly possible, finding a maintenance phase there when you're really maxing out that strength, I think is going to be the key. So now, how should we train during a cut? Because we are going to be energy deficient in a deficit, we want to focus on training during a cut to make sure we maintain as much muscle as possible, and we're going to maintain our strength. Because we know we don't need quite as much volume and that glycolytic demand for strength isn't there, we can make sure that we maintain our strength with a few heavy sets per week. So pick your big compound movements, hit maybe 3 heavy sets at low reps, keep that volume really low. We can maintain our strength there. Then with the rest of our session, we're going to focus on muscle maintenance. So again, we're going to look at that minimum effective dose. So instead of the 10 to 20 sets per muscle group per week, we're going to look to back that down to maybe about a maximum of 6 sets per muscle group per week. And we're going to hit that with a high proximity to failure. So cutting the volume down, but just bumping that intensity up. So what I like to do in this case is I'll take my big strength movements, hit those with a low volume, and then the rest of the session, I'm picking an exercise from each muscle group and hitting that to failure. So maybe I do 1 or 2 warm-up sets, and then I crush a set to absolute failure, and then I move on to the next muscle group. I will do this a few times per week to make sure that I hit all my muscle groups, and I keep that volume low enough, but keep the intensity up to make sure I can maintain as much muscle as possible and keep me feeling good during the cut. I don't want to be super, super hungry because that's only going to make it harder. So I want to use the little bit of fuel I have, make sure I maintain as much strength and muscle as possible. And I think this is the best way to train during a cut. Throw in some low intensity cardio into this, and I think you're good to go to maximize that fat loss and maintain as much muscle as possible during your cuts.